Hi, and welcome aboard the MS Morticia, the finest cruise ship in the Funebris Line's fleet. We trust you will enjoy your stay on board, and we'll highlight some of our many fine restaurants. You'll find that the ship is lavishly equipped with... Wait, hang on. Hello? Are you sleeping? Oh, you're dead. The cruise industry is simply massive. There's something like 350 cruise ships actively motoring around the world's exotic and exciting ports with 35 million passengers per year, generating around $40 billion in revenue. Now, with 35 million people going to sea in ships each year, it's only natural that a portion of that number will expire along the way. Naturally, we're not necessarily talking about accidents and falling overboard here. We're talking about heart attacks, strokes, and other unexpected ends. Although the public image of cruise ships has been one of retirees living up their twilight years, the truth is that the industry's demographics are getting younger and younger. Since 2019, the average age of a cruise passenger has dropped from 66 all the way down to 55, a pretty significant change in such a short period of time. Even so, people die on cruise ships all the time, just as they do in other unexpected places. So before we go on, just note this. This isn't an indictment on the cruise industry. People aren't expiring in large numbers on cruise ships. It's just a natural part of the human life cycle that unfortunately sometimes plays out without warning on ships hundreds of miles away from land. So that presents crew with a difficult problem, right? What the heck are they supposed to do with a corpse on a floating resort? Well, I sat down with our good friend Caitlin Doughty, former mortician, current author and YouTuber and just all-around legend, to learn about just how crews need to deal with this difficult situation at sea.
In some ways, cruise ships seem very ready to have somebody die on them. Most of them have morgues. And morgues, in this case, would be something in the industry we might call a reefer, which is essentially a refrigerator for a dead body. The kind of things you see in crime shows with 3 sliding metal spaces for a dead body to go in. And you don't really want more than 3. At the point you have more than 3 dead people on your cruise, something maybe has gone wrong. But there should be plenty of room. It should be set to about 36 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius. And the thing about refrigeration is that it's magic for a dead body. It really keeps it at the right temperature so the process of decomposition doesn't start. But if you're not able to properly refrigerate a body, it can create a lot of challenges because the body is a somewhat volatile thing after death, and decomposition starts almost immediately. So you're starting to have the bacteria in your stomach eating away at you. They have what I call bacteria farts, which means that causes gas to form inside your stomach. And you're turning green. These things happen and it's completely natural, but it's not something that the family usually wants. They don't want their person just in the back room of a cruise ship. So the real decision, the logistical decision that has to be made if someone dies on a cruise ship is this person going off the ship at the next port? Are we just rolling them off into Antigua or Puerto Rico or wherever we are? Or are they going in our on-ship morgue and staying there under refrigeration until we get back to the United States, Europe, wherever you started? Obviously, there are cruises that are polar cruises or to see the icebergs, but most cruises, I would venture to say, are in tropical environments. That's why people love to go on cruises. And when you have hot, humid weather, that's really your worst enemy in keeping a dead body fresh after they die. And so if you're already in a ship that's hot, maybe a little bit sticky, that can really kickstart the process of bacterial decomposition. And that's, you have a certain window of time, say 24 hours, but things after that with no refrigeration, with no cooling down can really start to happen pretty quickly. And you need to be aware of that if you have a dead person in the back room or just in the doctor's office somewhere where they died on your ship.
Well, fortunately, things have changed quite a bit from the recent past. Let me tell you a quick story. It's summer 1959, and my grandparents, Dad and my auntie, are emigrating from Britain on the old P&O liner Strathnaver. The ship is mid-Indian Ocean, and there comes some shocking but not totally unusual news. Two young men, Scandinavians, had fallen asleep in their deck chairs, totally unfamiliar with the intensity of the southern hemisphere's sun. They'd been burnt to a crisp and they passed away from exposure, sunstroke, and extreme dehydration. Now, this was a tragedy. In fact, my granddad went around with a tin collecting coins from passengers for the widows that were left behind. But Strathnaver was an old ship from the 30s, with refrigeration only for food and victuals. So the men were put into weighted canvas bags, and after a brief service, they were dumped overboard. This kind of thing is almost unimaginable to us now. I mean, 1959 was only 66 years ago, for goodness sake, and very much within living memory. You'll be happy to know that things have changed a lot since then, though. Unlike back in 1959, cruise ships today are designed specifically for cruising. Back in the 50s, very, very few had been designed that way from the ground up. And as technology has improved, so has our general living condition and our expectations around things like hygiene, cleanliness, safety, and comfort. But so is our attitude around death. Generally speaking, in the West, we're exposed to it less and less, but back in the early 20th century and before then, it was far more common as people passed away thanks to diseases and illnesses which are now very curable. So, cruise ships have to deal with deaths on a regular basis. It's thought that around 200 people die every year on cruise ships, which is really an amazingly small number when you remember there are more than 30 million passengers annually, and cruise lines have to deal with the sudden, unexpected passings with respect, dignity, and subtlety. This, as it happens, isn't always easy. Sometimes it just doesn't go at all to plan.
There was a case several years ago of a man named Robert Jones who died on a Celebrity Equinox cruise. And he was an older gentleman. He died of a heart attack, and his wife, Marilyn, was with him. They told the wife that she had essentially two options. The first option was that they could roll her husband right off the ship in Puerto Rico, where they were docked. But that had the ability to be incredibly complicated logistically, because she'd be off. It is a territory of the US, but for all intents and purposes, a foreign country for her. A feeling of perhaps going through the coroner. There might have been an autopsy on her husband, through the local funeral home for embalming, doing all of the transit paperwork, flying his body back to Florida. Very complicated. And then the other option they gave her was, we'll just put her on the morgue. Well, he'll be safe. The refrigeration will slow down decomposition, and she can just go to her local funeral home of choice once they reach Fort Lauderdale in Florida. And so she chose that second option. And when they finally did, the funeral home came on the ship in Fort Lauderdale about a week later to get her husband. He was not in the morgue. He was in a drinks cooler on a wooden pallet on the floor in a body bag they had. And I believe that either their morgue was broken, something had happened, it wasn't cool enough, and they decided to switch it up. Refrigeration is refrigeration, right? And you can put them in this other drinks cooler. Refrigeration, in this case, is not always refrigeration. And it was not cool enough. It was not the 36 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees Celsius you need. And the body had started to pretty severely decompose, to the point that the funeral home in Florida told the family they could not have an open casket viewing for their father, for their husband, because this had happened. And they sued them. They sued them for $1 million, which for that small amount of money, I personally think, just give them the money. Don't turn this into a big public relations disaster. You're a huge cruise ship company. Come on, folks.
So that's how things shouldn't go. It turns out there's a fairly detailed procedure for dealing with this kind of thing at sea, designed specifically to avoid the kind of horrible shock Mr. Jones's wife and family endured. One of the difficulties crews have to face is in handling the situation with quiet dignity.
If somebody dies a natural death on a cruise ship, I think they should be pretty well trained up and equipped to discreetly handle the body. I don't know if this is true on every cruise ship, but I have seen the phrase Operation Rising Star as the phrase used to alert, kind of like code blue, to discreetly alert people that something is happening, or the crew at least. And if somebody dies, they're most likely going to be taken for medical attention. which is presumably down below the ship anyway. And hopefully at that point, if the person is coded, if they cannot be revived, despite best efforts of medical professionals on the ship, they can be discreetly moved to this area of the morgue and slid in. And then when they finally reach their destination, after everybody disembarks, the funeral home, perhaps the sheriff, can come on board and then discreetly remove the body to the local funeral home.
Passengers are extremely unlikely to die on a cruise, not least of all because maritime safety standards are so high now, but because medical facilities on ships now are quite impressive. They're not exactly hospitals, and you won't be doing surgery at them. Think of them more like advanced care clinics. They're set up with a doctor who has to meet regulatory requirements for the US, UK, and Australia, among others, plus nurses who are all full-time members of the crew. The hospital beds look very much like what you'd see on land as well, with abilities for rudimentary tests and EKGs, defibrillation and monitoring. In fact, there are even facilities for blood transfusions, but because storing blood types on cruise ships is impractical, if there's any ever need for transfusion, a call will go out over the PA for passengers of a certain blood type to donate. When it comes to handling the dead, the facilities are equally as impressive.
My belief is there would be absolutely no body preparation for a dead body on a ship. In fact, Mr. Jones, who was part of this lawsuit, when they pulled out his body, not only was it decomposed, it still had the sort of oxygen tubes and various tubes coming out of his body. So they are not prepping the body at all. They are leaving that to the funeral home, and they will do all of the work. But the one thing that they do have to do is make sure they are under pretty intense refrigeration to stop that death in a moment in time and allow the funeral home to handle it later, because they don't have any facilities other than refrigeration on the ship. I think they should, especially since there are so many older people on ships and people who, may be living on ships for a significant amount of time before they die. I think it would be lovely if they just had the nurse or the doctor lightly prepare the body and lay it out on the cruise ship. To me, that's very romantic and a nice old way to do it, but they probably don't feel the same way.
So, the end goal for ship's crews is to store your remains with dignity and care until they can be transferred to a shore-based medical or mortuary team. It makes sure that families still get their last goodbyes and the deceased is treated with respect to the last. Burial at sea is quite a natural thing. We've been doing it for centuries, but to modern-day sensibilities, it seems weirdly antiquated and kind of ghoulish, so you probably won't be seeing that on any passenger ships anytime soon. Death at sea is natural, but surprisingly rare, with tens of millions of people enjoying their holidays peacefully and without issue. Expiring should absolutely be the last thing on your mind at sea, as you sip on your pina colada. Thank you so much to our friend Caitlin Doughty for joining us today. You can find her channel over at Ask a Mortician. She's actually working on a book right now, delving into the topic of Titanic's dead, how they were recovered, and the lasting legacy of the ship. You won't want to miss it, so keep an eye out on her channel over the coming months. Until next time, as always, thank you so very much for watching. Stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we get new videos out weekly. If you want to support my work and get really cool perks like behind the scenes and early access, please visit my Patreon in the link in the description below, or sign up as a YouTube member. Come and join the crew. As always, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you again next time.